Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's the appointed time for this council meeting to commence. But before opening the council meeting, I'm required to give you notice that under clause 91(4) of the Governance and Meeting Conduct Local Law provides the following. This public meeting is being recorded to improve access to the meeting for our community. The recording will be published and will be retained by Council in accordance with the Council's legal obligations. As a visitor in the public gallery, your presence may be recorded. I now declare open the ordinary council meeting of the 21st of August. And in doing so, I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and to elders from other communities who may be with us today. In the opening prayer, Almighty God, we humbly ask Thee to bless and guide this council in its deliberations so that we may truly preserve the welfare of the people whom we serve. Amen. Thank you and welcome everyone. As is normal with council meetings, we have an agenda to follow, and I will ask the gallery if they have any questions when those items are called. And there will also be provision at the end of the meeting for public questions. And that is limited to 2 questions per member of the gallery. The councillors are present. There's no apologies or granting of leave of absence. No citizenship ceremony. Confirmation of the minutes of the previous council meeting. Councillor Bustle.
I'd like to move the minutes, Mr Mayor, please, and make the adjustments on the minutes that the councillor that holds the tourism portfolio that sits on the panel of the tourism events grants program, which was omitted in the minutes.
Someone like to second that? Councillor Fuller. Any discussion? Any questions from the gallery? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Motion's carried. Conflict of interest disclosures.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I have a conflict of interest in 13.3 as the Stock Agent Association, the SAAB, and 16.3 relevant with the owner.
Mr Mayor, I have a conflict of interest with 11.1 as having a director interest as the request for the training is implemented.
Thank you. No petitions. Hearing your deputations is nil. Councillor reports.
Through the Mayor, item 11.1 is dealing with a request for professional development for Councillor Curry, the Deputy Mayor, which is why he's absented himself from the room. The request essentially is for Council to support provision of training to do the Australian Institute of Company Directors course, which is a 5-day program run by AICD and supported by the Municipal Association of Victoria in Geelong in September. In short, the key learning objectives from that program are to learn about the role of a board and the practice of directorship, decision-making, director duties, responsibilities, the legal environment, risks and issues for boards, strategy and strategic thinking, financial literacy and achieving board effectiveness, and putting all of those learnings into practice. So the request is that Council provides support by way of using some of our MAB credit points to cover the training cost, along with some modest additional costs for accommodation during that period.
Any questions from the gallery? I'd like to move the recommendation. Councillor Ruiz, second to Councillor Fitzpatrick. Any discussion? Councillor Bassett.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I support Mark's personal development because I think it's money well spent, and I believe that education is the ticket to prosperity. So educate. And I think that young people, middle people, old people will all have a chance to be educated and change our great society. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any other discussion? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? The motion is carried. Thanks, Brendan.
Mr. Mayor, could I please put a motion forward as 11.2? Sorry, I'll wait for Councillor Curry to come back. So this isn't in the agenda items tonight. And it's just to move a quick motion to move our contents of the current meeting here tonight, to bring forward our table of contents 16.1 to 16.3 inclusive in the order of items of business, which is development services, to immediate business today. I see a lot of the people in the crowd in the gallery here today are in relation to these matters, and that might alleviate and get you home a bit earlier rather than delaying it to the end of the council meeting towards the end of our situation. So if that's the motion I'm putting forward. Thank you.
Someone second that motion? Second to Councillor Keller. Any discussion? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Motion's carried. Thank you. 16.1, Planning Scheme Amendment C71. Thank you, Mr. Green.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report is presented to Council as the relevant planning authority to consider the recently received panel report for the Wangaratta Planning Scheme Amendment C71, which is the Wangaratta residential growth areas, northwest and south. This report contains the planning panel's review of the amendment and the panel's recommendations following the hearing held on the 30th of April and the 1st of May this year. This process completes approximately 4.5 years' worth of work by a range of council staff and stakeholders to develop and justify the amendment to plan for the future growth of Wangaratta. The report is presented to council to consider the recommendations of the panel report for the growth areas, which focuses on addressing the outstanding submissions, makes changes to the amendment to implement the panel supported recommendations to address the outstanding submissions, requests council to adopt the amendment and submit the amendment to the Minister for Planning for final approval. In summary, the panel was very supportive of council's strategic approach to the amendment C71 and recommends that the amendment be adopted as exhibited, subject to some minor changes that address some of the key issues raised during the exhibition period. And further, council has offered to undertake an internal review of the inputs informing the development contributions element of the amendment to ensure that descriptions and inputs are consistent, and to have this formally adopted at a public meeting. And that internal review has been completed and is part of the attachments tonight. The officer's recommendation is on the screen.
Thank you. Questions from the gallery? Please state your name and the suburb.
My name is Gary Wilson. I'm a resident out at the northwest area for the future development. I'm representing quite a few landowners tonight that are in this room. There was a meeting last week held to look into these projects that are going to go ahead, and from a landowner's point of view, it was to do with the amount of infrastructure that we were asked to pay for, and Julie went through that last week. One of the questions that we put forward to the councillors was in relation to Christensen's Lane, and the figures that I presented last week indicated that there's been over $1 million overcharged for that particular road. The question is to the councillors, has there been the question asked to the appropriate authorities within the council to find out if this is true and correct?
Mr Clark, would you like?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Gary. I think some of the assumptions you made last week were incorrect. So, and I think it was a bit misleading in the original document that went out for public exhibition. So, the way Christensen Lane was costed, it said 100% apportionation to the developers, but the way it had been calculated, the cost, it was only half of the pavement had been included in those costs. So it did include both sides of a curb and channel, but only half the road. So whilst it said it was 100%, it was really something slightly more than 50%. Now in the, at the request of the panel, there was some work done to clarify all those specifics, and that's one of the attachments in the agenda tonight. So pages 265 to 382, and more detail on the costing of each of those road projects. So it makes it clear that the total cost of that project, Christensen, is 4.865 and a bit of change million, and the part that's apportioned to the DCP is 2.433. So you can see it's around very close to 50%. It's within a few $100s of 50% of the total cost.
So you admit there was 2 kilometres of curb and channel? It's a kilometre long. I'm just asking that question. You agree that
yes,
in that
yes, I
there
do.
was 2 kilometres of curb and channel?
Yes, I do.
You agree that there's 5.6 metres of pavement for the particular road?
Correct, which is half the width.
If you look at Reith Road, it's exactly the same.
So you'll find that the pavement width is 11.2 normally, and the part that's apportioned to this project is exactly half of that 5.6. And when you work out the and all the cubic metres and square metres, when you work that out, it divides out perfectly.
Yeah, well, the cubic metres of the rock, the foundational material, works out to 5.6 metres. So
correct. That's right. It's 5.6. That's not the seal width. That's the full pavement width of the road.
I agree with
which
that.
is half the road.
But it's exactly the same. The way you worked it out. So Christensen Lane has been overcharged. If you look at it, it's been overcharged.
No, it hasn't. You're paying for half of the road.
If you look at mesh and the detailed list, okay, it's got 2 kilometres of curb and channel, okay, and it's got 5.6 metres of pavement, which makes the total width of the road about 11.1 metres, which is what you indicated.
So I put the 5.2 in your mouth. It's 5.8 metres you're paying for, which is half of an 11.6 metre road pavement.
But in Reith Road, it's exactly the same. It's 5.6. So I'm just comparing apples with apples here, that's all.
So do you agree that a road pavement is 11.6 metres wide for a collector road? That's our standard collector road width.
Yep.
So, and this is apportioning half of that to the DCP, 5.8.
If you look at Reith Road and the other roads, okay, that's exactly the way you've worked it out, and Christensen Lane should be exactly the same. It's the same sort of road, 11.6 metres wide. So you're obviously using the middle of the road, you're going to retain that and widen the road on both sides of the road to make it 11.6 metres wide. That's how I read it. If I'm wrong, please tell me.
Well, I think you're wrong.
Well, if you do the sums, there's over $1 million misplaced there.
So, look, I've just pulled up Cruise Street, for instance. Construction Cruise Street, 11.6 metre pavement road.
Alan, it's a brand new road. We're talking about,
to 9 metres.
we're talking about upgrading an existing road. Cruise Street, with all due respect, is a brand new road. That's where the
Yeah, so you're not disputing the width of the road?
No, leaving the roads the same.
Yeah, so that's because you're not paying for the full cost of those existing roads.
A full road is not being put in, is that correct?
So
the roads being widened.
So we could have done this two ways. We could have costed out the full cost of the road, then said you're paying 50%, or we could cost out half the road and say you're paying all of it. It's the same answer.
If you look at all the other roads, Linda
Gary,
Road.
I think you've had enough time.
Okay, all right, next question. All right, just, I think the question was to the councillors. Has anyone asked the questions?
I don't think.
To make a due diligence assessment and to have a vote. It's a very, very important issue.
I'd just like to, I certainly have asked some questions over the last X amount of weeks and even as late as tonight in the meeting. The only positive that I can say, and I will say some more in my speech a little bit later on during this segment, is that there is an auditing process, correct, Alan? So if there has been some discrepancies and processes done that it does work out to come back cheaper, that will then be passed on through the DCP. I would be hastened to say that that's not correct. Would you say, Barry, too? Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, one more, Mr. Mayor, please. In relation to the meeting last week, there was a train of thought that the landowners out there are going to make money out of these developments, and so they should duly pay for the infrastructure and the upgrading and the community centre, which is 5.2 mil, that we're required to pay 3.2 mil. It'd be fair to say that when one of the landowners asked the question, what happens if the land doesn't sell in a quick time, so that people have to borrow money to pay for infrastructure. The question was raised, what happens if that doesn't sell quickly? And one of the councillors indicated that that's the game you play. Well, I can assure you from my point of view, this isn't a game, this is people's livelihoods. Thank you.
Any other questions from the government?
Hello, my name's Greg Mitchell. I'm a resident out at Lindner Road, and I'm helping represent another 15 landowners out there. And my first question is that $3 million was allocated to building of the Queen Street Bridge and some road around it a couple of years ago, and there's a fair bit in the media about that. My question is sorry, I'll just give you background. That money has been reallocated somewhere else. And my question is, were the councillors aware that the council redirected those funds somewhere else? And did that follow procedure?
So, Greg, we've had this discussion obviously, but so a bit of background for people. Council received some additional roads to recovery funding, and we initially thought that yes, we could put that to the bridge in Crew Street. It was a neat, from an accounting point of view, meeting the requirements of that particular program, and we advertised that fact. We realised shortly afterwards that we couldn't double dip. We couldn't take the government's money and then charge the developers for the same piece of work. So that money was moved onto other road projects throughout the municipality. That was done in the time of the administrators were here and they were fully involved in that decision making. So it was previous council. Greg.
Yeah, but the announcement, Alan, was after administrators had finished. It was the 23rd of December 2016.
Which announcement are you saying?
About in the media about the $3 million from Canberra allocated to the Crew Street project.
No, the media report. I was in Canberra with the chair of the administrators. The money, we were given the heads up that the money was coming our way, and I think it was announced shortly after that. So I'm pretty sure it was in the administrators' time. Greg?
It was in the Chronicle on the 23rd of December 2016. So I'm just asking if a correct procedural protocol was followed.
Well, I
to move that money.
It was raised to recovery money, and
is there some kind of document to show that?
well, I think you'd have to possibly ask the chairman of the administrators unless Mr Clark's got a document.
I think through the mayor, the point is none of us have any documents here tonight because we've just been asked, coming off, we've just been asked the question. The additional funding granted would have been picked up and included in our budget as part of our mid-year review process if the timing that Greg is talking about is correct, and I can't recall whether that was the timing or not, but we do a review of our budget halfway through every year, which generally gets adopted around about Feb. Don't quote me on the date, but that's generally when we adopt our mid-year review, and that's where we would have presumably incorporated any changes resulting from additional funding. The Roads to Recovery money that you're talking about is not allocated for a specific project. It's a general purpose allocation. There are guidelines about the types of projects that can be allocated to, but we have quite a bit of flexibility to choose which roads or bridges or what type of works it's allocated to.
But my question is, if the council is...
Well, I obviously can't speak for the councillors.
And your second question?
My second question is, I'll just give a background. All this money, just for the, can you hear that? Yeah. All this money is paid for by the landowners, developers for this big project, and this is for infrastructure around the development, not within the development. I just want to make that clear. A lot of people don't understand that. The landowners / developers are paying for all the infrastructure within the project. This extra $30 million, which is CPI attached, is for peripheral development around the project. Okay? So,
30 million?
So 30 million. Do you realise how much it is? It's 1,600 blocks out there. And this 30 million will actually make a block, we estimate, in the next couple of years, an extra $20,000 per block extra to develop per house block. So affordability is an issue there for Wangaratta. It's not just about us, the landowners, it's an affordability thing, and Wangaratta moving forward with affordable housing. Now, my second question is, Wangaratta Council actually adopted the Wangaratta Freight and Land Use Strategy in December by this council, in December 2016, saying that Cruise Street and the Cruise Street Bridge and the connection right to Reith Road from the racecourse is part of their freight and land use strategy. It's been adopted by council, voted for by people in this room. Yeah. Why are landowners paying for all of that? Is that fair? Why?
So there's a couple of things that I think need to be said about all that. The first relates to the to your point about the millions of dollars cost of infrastructure. The reality is, with the developer contribution plan, we can only charge developers for infrastructure costs that are relevant and required to be upgraded to facilitate and support additional development. So
outside the development.
Just let me speak if you wouldn't mind. We've waited patiently and haven't interrupted you. We can't just grab money from developers for any piece of infrastructure we choose to. We've got to go through a very structured process to demonstrate that whatever infrastructure upgrade we're asking to be done is actually required, has a direct nexus to that development. The alternative to the developers not paying for it is the council paying for it because it is required, and therefore every ratepayer in the community paying a portion of that infrastructure. The argument is if most of the infrastructure is required because of the development, then the developers pay most of the cost. If there's only a small portion of the usage required because of the development, you would ordinarily expect to pay a lower cost. What the council, though, has adopted, and what has been through a panel process and independently tested, is rather than having a really complicated model where we say, here's 30 or more infrastructure projects that need some sort of upgrade, and instead of going through some sort of really complex assessment of, we think that this 30% is required for the development, with this one 50% is a portion to development, and having quite a complicated formula for working out which bit the developers pay for, we've paired that right back to what we think the core infrastructure projects are, and apportioned the full cost of those core projects to it. So that's the proposition that's been through the independent panel and supported by the panel. It's a much simpler equation and calculation, and it will result in a lower cost per block to develop than the more complex model would have to the developer.
Am I going to comment on that? Yeah, no, I don't have much more to say. Thanks. Anyway, look, I'm just very concerned about affordability, and this is an extra cost that hasn't gone on in previous developments to this extent. So Arlington Estate, Oak Williams Lane, they didn't have these costs. This is a new cost for Wangaratta. So I just like to point that out to everyone. Thank you.
I think that council realised that it's the first DCP that's taken place in Wangaratta. We're probably 10 years behind other councils. We've had advice that the DCP that we've put into place is in the middle of the road. It's not low and it's not high compared to other councils who've had DCPs for a long, long time.
What's a DCP?
The Developers Contribution Plan. Any other questions from the gallery? No questions from the gallery. Someone like to move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Currier. Have I got a second? Councillor Fuller. Councillors, any discussion?
I'd like to make a few points of discussion, Mr. Mayor, thank you. There are always a number of points that we need to look at and move forward with, and that's our problem here today. We need to move forward. This development has been on the agenda, I think Barry was saying there before, 4 years, and we do need to forward. By holding it back and changing our recommendation now will certainly hold us back by another 2 years, and maybe that's not fair on some landowners, especially in both the northwest and the southeast growth areas. The DCP is for a supply of infrastructure required to meet the future needs of the community for these areas. Once paid for by councils. However, with rate capping and state government not giving us the amounts of money that we used to once get, we have to fund the projects. And of this DCP, and given advice from our staff here, that we are still funding council a lot of the DCP part of it, and obviously being funded by the residents who subdivide their land, or the subdividers on who the residents sell their land to, who will then obviously have to cop these costs and work with council to pay them. Council will also invest a lot of money before any DCP money comes in, and of course we have to borrow that money to be able to do that, so we need to recoup that cost back somehow too. However, there are a few anomalies that certainly do concern me, and I'll go back to what Gary was certainly saying, and in relation to, we have had a strategy to move forward for our freight, and it is a major strategy that we are looking to get busy. We're having trucks coming through the town, we have them coming around over major structures and bridges, etc. And it was part of the, I'm purely just pointing these out as statistics and stats here, that it was adopted that the recommendations of the Wangaratta Freight and Land Use Study within 0 to 5 years is to implement preliminary interim northwest bypass route via Cruise Street, Wallen Road, Lindner Road, Christensen's Lane and Wanganderry Road, with a new bridge crossing the 3 Mile Creek designed to accommodate larger trucks. That obviously is in our DCP area. The medium term, move interim northwest bypass route when Cruise Street reaches Reiths Road to Cruise Street, Reith Road, Lindner Road, Christensen Lane and Wanganderry Road, all again to accommodate larger vehicles, as again part of our freight strategy that, you know, I feel that the people in these subdivisional areas are now paying for, or helping to pay for, which they don't mind paying for part of. But personally, I believe the council probably should have paid for more. However, moving forward, in council's decision on DCP state, that the benefits of the DCP are that they identify necessary infrastructure and establish a framework to ensure that the costs of infrastructure is shared equitably by all development proponents and by the broader community where relevant. Each DCP provides certainty for all developers and for the future community by ensuring that all necessary infrastructure will be provided in a timely way and to a specific standard as development progressively takes place. So, in conclusion, moving forward again, we need this development. Wangaratta needs to grow. Without these developments, and I'm sure everyone will be in agreement, without this rezoning or the hold-up of this rezoning, Wangaratta will fall short. Thank you.
Any other council? Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank the landholders for telling me your stories the other night here in this chamber. I got a pretty good idea of what your thoughts were then. This project would not be happening without the DCP. But this is one of the reasons why Wangaratta has hardly grown since I went to school here in 1971. It's grown 2,000 people since 1971. So my concerns are, if you cut back and start fiddling with the contributions, it'll take longer to sell, longer to develop. And I want growth, and I want it soon. I just don't want to hold this up, because I think the benefits will far outweigh the cost that you're talking about. So, for that reason, I will support the motion.
Councillor Butler.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. As over the information that I received the other night, I've done a bit of soul searching with this and to try and come up with an answer that I'd be comfortable with. And in relationship to the community development, it is stated in the consultant's report back in 2016, these figures have been on the table since 2016, that you were going to be a DCP of 37.5% were going to be external users, therefore reducing the 5 million down to 3.2. I feel, and I've tried to come up with some sort of, we've had much discussion in relationship to the bridge over the Crew Street Bridge, and it says in that report, without that bridge, this is an integral part of this development and it would not go ahead if it wasn't there. And that was adopted before the freight strategy went in. So this has been on the table for nearly 2 years, or 2 years exactly now, to come up with some sort of a solution. We could go out, as we were told the other night, and put a lot more of the cost on. We've got to do other infrastructure works to accommodate the traffic flow. So, when you analyse everything down, and I tried to make sure that we understood the figures, and I think it goes back to Greg's first question, did we understand some of the figures? I probably do now, but I didn't do when you were here the last time, because I've done a fair bit of homework on it. But I'm going to have to support it, because if we make too many alterations to this, and I think you've also supported, and I've had verbal agreement with some of you, that you don't want to hold it up. Well, 2 years is going to be, could be 3 years, the way government moves in millimetres, not in yards and miles, it just moves along at a pace. We can't wait, and I don't think you people want to wait either. And we've got measures in place, as you've been told, in relationship to audits, to make sure it's as fair as possible. And that's all we can do, is make sure we keep the eye on it and make sure it works out properly the fairest way we can. So therefore I'm going to support the motion.
Any other discussion? Councillor Fitzpatrick.
I'd just like to reiterate something Harvey said, and that was that it has taken a fair bit of deliberation on everybody's part as to which way we should be moving forward. I think there's some legitimate points that the developers, the farm owners actually want to make, but I look to the panel and have a look at what their recommendations is, and I believe some of the recommendations have been taken on board. The panel is not shy in saying what they believe is correct, and when the panel support this, it gives me confidence that it's moving in the right direction. If we were to go back and ask people to recalculate, even in the panel's words, you know, it could be a lot dearer, could be a lot more expensive. But for the best interest of Wangaratta to move forward, I think that we should move on this and move on it positively. Thank you.
Seeing it's such an important issue, I'm going to ask the CEO to read the recommendations, even though they're on the table, on the wall behind me, just so that everyone's aware of what the recommendations will be.
Thank you, Mayor. The recommendation that's before councillors is that Council 1 considers the Wangaratta Planning Scheme Amendment C71 panel report and the recommendation of this report in accordance with Section 27 of the Planning Environment Act. 2, completes an internal review of inputs informing the development contribution plans as supported by the panel. 3, adopts the review of the development contribution plan, including the minor adjustments to costs of the development contributions as outlined in Attachment 3. 4, adopts Planning Scheme Amendment C71, Wangaratta Residential Growth Areas, with changes recommended by the panel, which are identified in Attachment 1, in accordance with Section 29 of the Act. 5, pursuant to Section 31 of the Act, submit the adopted amendment to the Minister for Planning for approval in accordance with Section 35 of the Act. And 6, notify submitters in writing of Council's decision.
Thank you. I'll now put the motion. Those in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you. Moving along to item 16.2. Wangareen Aerodrome Master Plan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report is presented to Council to consider the feedback and summarise the changes proposed to the draft Wangaratta Aerodrome Master Plan in 2017 as a result of the public exhibition process period. 3 submissions were received and offered some informative and constructive comment. There have been some changes to the original draft document which have been included in the accompanying attachments. The changes proposed include the relocation of the current Wangaratta Aero Club building to assist the future development and configuration of a patient transfer facility to accommodate emergency services. As an effective party and submitter to the plan, Council did meet recently with representatives of the Airport Users Group to discuss the proposed changes, and this has resulted in some further amendments. Council is now asked to progress this plan by adopting it with the recommended changes to address the feedback received. In relation to some of the commentary around the Aero Club building, at a recent meeting it was agreed that no final decision on the exact location of where the Aero Club may or may not be relocated, and one option was to also consider things like the terminal building, or an alternative was a second floor facility on top of the medical transfer building. The master plan is designed to provide guidance and possible locations for future, and to guide the future decision making around where particular infrastructure will be. And the main infrastructure being considered at the moment is the currently funded 2 large hangars, and that any final decision on the any final location would be made in consultation with the users. And it's been noted that there was an omission in the recommendation, and that there is an amended recommendation to include dot points 5 and 6, which include the seeking of authorisation to progress the planning scheme amendments required for the implementation, and this simply saves a further separate report just to address the authorisation process. The amended officer's recommendation is put forward to Council tonight.
Thank you. Questions from the gallery?
Council, my name's Bill Hall. I'm the President, Secretary and Public Officer of the Wangaratta Aero Club. Firstly, thank you for the amended series of recommendations. I have a couple of questions. Firstly to the CEO. Brendan, in a recent meeting you committed to working with the users group and the club to form a collaborative working group to come up with the final design for the aerodrome. When do you intend to come good with this offer?
Oh, he's having a wry laugh over there. Bill, I don't specifically remember that conversation. Can you remind me in what forum we discussed that?
Yeah, in the first master plan, when we presented our original master plan response back to the council, your question to me and to the group specifically was, would you be prepared to work with us on a final design, and who would we contact, and can we exchange some numbers? So the answer is still yes.
Yeah, sure. So I think the point that Barry just made in his introduction was that, particularly in relation to the final location of your building and therefore the design that supports the development of the 2 new hangars and so forth, that we would do that in consultation with the Aero Club users group. So I would suggest that we get whatever group of people need to be involved in that discussion together to get on with that consultation that Barry's alluded to.
Yeah, I think we're in furious agreement.
I can't give you an exact time and date, but I'll ask Barry to go back and talk to his team, assuming this is actually adopted tonight. We've clearly an adopted version of the plan gives us much more certainty around what it is we're having the conversation about. So assuming it's adopted tonight, I'll get Barry to go back to the team and make contact with you to establish an appropriate framework and time.
Yeah, yeah. My second question, again to Brendan, is Brendan, in the past you've characterised the consultant's work as being woeful. Do you still stand by that?
Bill, again, I don't specifically remember saying woeful. I'm not saying I didn't, but I don't specifically recall that. We've certainly had we've had a number of iterations backwards and forwards with the consultants from when the very first draft was produced through until the version we're looking at tonight. So I think it would be fair to say that we were not happy with the early content, and we've done a fair bit of work with them to get up to a point that we're happy with. I don't remember using the words woeful, but clearly we've asked for additional work to be done on the basis that we didn't think it was satisfactory.
Thank you.
Other questions from the gallery?
Evening everybody, Adrian Vaughan representing the members of the Wainwright Aero Club. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and councillors and council staff. Now, with the Aerodrome Master Plan, the Aero Club is just more than ecstatic to work with everyone to achieve the best thing we can and the best outcome for the precinct. You know, we've always maintained that. And what we're sort of slightly confused by is that we're trying to help council as much as we can, but there seems to be an active, almost active participation to not help us at all. And with that in mind, the Aero Club has been advised it will be relocated to the terminal, or at worst out in the car park, and also forfeit a valuable asset, which, according to the master plan, you guys think that you own 75% of the building. It was constructed entirely by members' funds and members' hands, so we're a bit confused about that. And at this stage, we still have not been engaged to discuss terms, lease arrangements, fees, fit-out costs, actual relocation, conditions of tenancy, lease costs, subletting. In short, there have been no discussions on this topic to the Aero Club whatsoever about what our future actually is, where we're going. Yet you're about to adopt a master plan that actually says, no, actually you're moving over here, or you're going to go here. So would the council agree that consultation has been, to put it bluntly, grossly inadequate?
Can I answer that, please? I think at the last meeting we had in the other room with the Aero Club, members of the Aero Club, I made the statement that as soon as we were able to get the master plan through, we would then get a working group together to look at what was going to happen. And until the master plan had been approved by the council, we couldn't enter into negotiations about things to happen. So now the master plan hopefully will be approved tonight, and once that's approved, then we can get on with the business of talking to the user groups.
Sure. Cool. Thank you, Mr. Bear. The second question is, we're quite astonished, or as to preface this, I guess we have to paint a picture before we can fill it in with colour. There's discussion of a medical centre, or a medical sort of facility at the airport. This was mentioned, seems to be ad hoc on the master plan response. it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So we actually went to those who know. We rang the CEO of the hospital. Their language was quite explicit with the fact that who the hell's going to fund it? Certainly not me. They have no interest in it whatsoever. We rang Ambulance Victoria, spoke to the head of Ambulance Victoria. No interest at all whatsoever in providing a facility like that, that environment. So my question to councillors is, you actually aware of the facts of what's really going on? They do not want it. They see no value in it. They don't want to pay for it. Yes, it's working in Mildura, but we don't have the traffic. We have no need whatsoever. And the fact that you've placed it, ironically, where our building is, to say, well, move that, we'll put this here, it makes more sense. And you want to build a facility that nobody wants. So the big question is, I think that one deserves an answer.
Thanks, Adrian. In relation to that question, well, officers did speak with both representatives of North East Health and to Ambulance Victoria, and they provided some figures in terms of the traffic that's currently coming out of that airport, and there are currently 415 movements, air ambulance transport movements, and that's not including the private medical transfer that does occur out of there as well. So there's 415 that air ambulance know, and that was in the last financial year, and they're considering that number will certainly increase. So that's where the figures came from. The officers did speak to both those and to North East Health. So unless we're talking to two lots of different people, we
they may have spoken to North East Health and say, well, but what was the response? The response we got was very, very adamant from both, straight to the top of both. And the bottom line is, you seem to want to put it in a position where an air ambulance will not park, cannot turn around. The most logical place is to put it in the terminal building. To put it where you've got it listed there is just insane from a navigation point of view. Yet suddenly there it appears, ironically, where our building happens to be in a way. A building that's been there, mind you, for 30 years. 60 years this club has been contributing to this community. Then suddenly you either want to put us 150 metres away, behind hangars, past the car park, or in a terminal building with no terms or no guidance as to what we're actually going to get. It's a very loose ship that we're on, yet you want to sort of pass this master plan with just not enough information and no consultation.
In relation to the facility was proposed in terms of the medical facility, but that's not the issue for why the Aero Club was proposed to have its building relocated. That is actually to meet some standards around turning to get to the new hangar locations, the new commercial hangar locations, because they need a certain terminal area, and the current orientation of the Aero Club building and its position doesn't facilitate that at the moment. So regardless of whether a medical facility was there or not, the relocation of the Aero Club building would still be on the table.
Yeah. The building that you guys actually think you own, but you don't. Thank you very much.
Just before you go, I'm just trying to think, it was Tuesday last week that I think that we met with the Wangaratta Aero Club, and the Wangaratta Aero Club actually made some really valid points. Their input to date has been pretty good. So, but one of the key things that come out of there was around the club and around this medical facility and what is the right there. Some of the comments that will come up, you know, there still needs to be a little bit of work done around all this. That was acknowledged. And specifically today, with the introduction, we've said that the Aero Club space, it'll come through collaboration and speaking with the Aero Club. So I just don't understand the anxiety. I understand where you're coming from, but we're trying to be very clear where we want to work collaborative. We recognise the comments from last week that we're not perfect and we've still got some work to do. So yeah, I just think you probably need to start spending time and working with us.
Yeah, we have the response dictated that. Our response to the Aerodrome Master Plan using actual facts and current data as opposed to the data you got spending all that money. We're trying, we want to, that's why we're here, but we're not getting any answers to the fact where are we going, what's happening, and we still do not know.
Yeah, I think also in addition, you know, the council is looking for the long-term future here, not just the here and now, and not just, don't take this the wrong way, but not just the Aero Club.
Oh yeah, absolutely, totally agree. We're interested in the entire precinct and what works best for all the businesses concerned. You know, the LAMEs, which is licensed aeronautical and mechanical engineers, all the businesses there. That's actually our focus. We want the place to grow, and we're actually part of that, and we're actually the front door to anyone who comes in through the air. So we can't be a front door if we're 150 metres away off the sideline. We can't train with a building there.
Once again, that was brought up last week and noted.
Okay, appreciate your time. Thank you, gentlemen and ladies.
Can I just point out two things, Adrian? But master plan to be adopted is what we would hope. This is my knowledge of the master plan of what we would hope that the airport could look like in the future and in coming years. But a master plan can change at any time through council resolution, etc. That things haven't worked out the way they should. Well, we need to change parts of the master plan. It's its entirety that we're looking to approve and get done, and make small adjustments or large adjustments along the way. Thank you.
Any other questions from the gallery?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name's Chris Balfour. That's B-A-L-F-O-U-R, as opposed to the way it was spelled last month in the minutes. Just to elaborate a little bit further on Adrian's comment with relation to the medical facility, has council considered the terminal building for the use of the medical facility, given that there are 3 offices in there of adequate size, that has a kitchenette, it has disabled access, double doors at the front, covered, so the ambulance could pull up there, take the patient out, put it inside into these offices that could be modified at very little cost. It has access through the back, through double doors once again, and right now it goes straight out onto where the aircraft pulls up. And it could be operational within a very short period of time and very little effort. Would that be a better consideration for the council, for the airport, as opposed to building a whole empty building?
Chris, I'm trying to find a new and creative and different way to say what we've collectively said several times tonight, and that is that there'll be a range of options that we'd be happy to talk about. And assuming the plan is actually endorsed tonight, we will be in touch with the user group with a view of getting together and having conversations about various models and options.
Any other questions from the gallery? Someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Curry? Councillor Rees? Any discussion? You want to take that?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank everybody for the work and the feedback from the airport. It's been great, and we're still listening, so I hope you understand that this is work in progress. So just bear with me, Mr. Mayor, see how I go here. The airport is very personal to me, because I stood on the tarmac at 10:30 at night on March the 8th, 2005. With my pregnant wife on a bed. I was going to have a baby, and it was too much premature. And I was told the baby's lungs hadn't developed enough to breathe. Now, unless we got there to Melbourne quickly, the chances were good. And you can guess what that means. And if there's room, you can hop on the plane too. And I had an hour's notice. That's not a reason for the airport is so important. Investment's important in the airport. Jack Russell, good young bloke, now 13, was born that night. He's about the size of a bottle. He wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for the flying job. And that's why investment's important in the airport. He will contribute over his lifetime to our community, and I'm sure this airport has many of those stories. And this is why I want concept investment in the airport. So this is the beginning of our airport's new journey. It's fresh new signage, master plan to develop it wisely, and a plan that's not set in stone. And I do support the Mayor with the working group. I'm happy to be a part of that. And it won't be a good plan if the working group doesn't work with everybody. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other councillors? Gary.
The other thing that I'd like to say is I made some comments to the users group 2 weeks ago. It wasn't 1 week ago, it was 2 weeks ago. And I still stand by that. You know, if you don't feel that the collaboration is happening, then you know the numbers to call with councillors. So all I can say is that there's an invitation open there. Thanks.
I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Motion's carried. 16.3. Your conflict view. Mr. Green.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 16.3 is a planning application that seeks approval to develop a renewable energy facility or a solar farm. Install some signage, remove native vegetation on land known as 38 Glenrowan Road West, Glenrowan. The proposal is to develop 245 hectares of land with up to 420,000 panels, generating up to 140 megawatts of power into the national grid. The proposal proposes 8 car parking spaces, some battery storage, the removal of 17 scattered native trees and 3 patches of native vegetation, some business identification signage. The application was formally advertised on the 15th of May 2018. As at tonight, 75 submissions have been received objecting to the application. The report is presented to Council due to the number of submissions under Council's deed of delegation. The applicant in the intervening times has exercised their right to apply to the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal based on Council's failure to determine the application within the allocated 60-day timeframe, and due to the fact that given the level of rejection, the application was most likely to proceed to VCAT. The recommendation from the officers is on the screen.
Let's the gallery. Anyone in the gallery wish to make comments? I do have a written question. Is Alison Hawke in the room?
Hi everybody. I would like to preface this question by saying that Escrow Pacific, I'm Alison Hawke, the Head of Development at Escrow Pacific, has on several occasions requested an opportunity to address the Council through the Planning Department and also through an email to the Mayor. The Planning Department advised the Mayor that they would consult with us directly and that it was inappropriate to talk with the Council. We would like to address the Council again because of the number of issues raised through the public notice period and the significant number of objections, and about any mitigation measures that we could put in place for this significant and uncommon proposal. The Planning Department only revealed concerns critical to the planning application on Friday after issuing their recommendation and without allowing ESCO an opportunity to attempt to address them. The grounds certainly weren't raised in a typical assessment stage, within the further information request period. Given that council will be party to the VCAT hearing, our strong difference of opinion to the logic within the officer's recommendation, as well as our significant experience as planners in renewables, including 16 solar projects under Esco Pacific, we request that you as the council use this opportunity to direct questions to myself in establishing the specific grounds for any decision. I would like to repeat that the application is a $150 million capital investment in the area, up to $25 million through local contractors and content, 150 jobs, majority of which will be from the local region, two skilled jobs through operations, and 4 to 6 part-time jobs through the 40-year operational lifetime. Not to mention the carbon offsets equivalent to 50,000 average Australian households. So my questions are as follows. As a question of planning process, we would like to understand why we were not made aware of several grounds critical to the outcome of the application during the request for further information stage or at any other time in spite of our multiple requests. To provide Esco Pacific with a fair opportunity to attempt to address these or manage these through a modified design. And I suppose that question is more directed to the planning department and to the council. These included the issues or the grounds of refusal that we had not heard of until Friday include reputational detriment to the historic township of Glenrowan, loss of native vegetation in spite of receiving advice from the Department of Environment that this could be managed through conditions and should not be a ground of refusal, and the loss of good quality agricultural land. The first time that we knew of the details of these grounds was on Friday. That was for the response.
Thanks, Alison, for the question. In relation to the first question regarding why that information wasn't in the further information request, the grounds for refusal are developed during the final stages of assessment, when officers are considering all of the inputs and all of the relevant information that they've received throughout the application process. The further information stage is in the early stages where council is seeking information to allow for the processing of an application rather than making sort of commentary about the suitability or not. In this case, a copy of all of the submissions that was received were provided to the applicant, being yourselves, with an opportunity to address any of the concerns that were raised through those submissions.
Is it not appropriate, though, that we have an opportunity to understand a ground which might be critical to the project later in the process, and particularly given that we requested that, given this application was in a long VCAT process, that we would be willing to defer or wait for a decision until we have such an opportunity to consult with the planning department and seek clarification in response to those grounds of refusal?
In relation to the grounds for refusal, that was the officer's recommendation after they've completed their assessment. As is a normal case, officers wouldn't go back to applicants and get into any sort of horse trading about what their conditions or what their grounds for refusal may or may not be.
Could I just ask you a question?
Yeah.
You just said you've got 14 structures under construction at the moment. Is that right, through Esco?
Sorry, we've been in our 2.5-year period in operation as Esco Pacific, we've overseen 16 planning approvals.
Okay, so you've dealt with a lot of planning departments and you've dealt with a lot of councils.
Yep.
I'm saying this for myself, but I believe my other councillors would say yes or no. Why hasn't anybody contacted us directly? And I'm a person who, planning is my portfolio, and I deal with 5 or 6 people every day that call me on certain planning matters, and I haven't heard a thing from you.
Yeah. We sought the advice of the planning department about how we might engage with the council. We were repeatedly told that wasn't appropriate. We did send an email to the mayor because we were concerned about the lack of engagement, and the mayor consulted with the planning department again and was advised not to consult. And I think he was informed that that we would be consulted with adequately at the officer level, which we don't feel we have been.
Thanks.
And your second question?
Yeah, so my second question is, could you please explain the policy basis to when identifying this site as high quality agricultural land? Having been through many applications, including the first solar farm within Australia to go to a state level court assessment on the grounds of loss of good quality agricultural land, that being the Morani solar farm in Mackay, which received a decision yesterday in favour of the solar farm, because of the lack of or the amount of good quality agricultural land was not considered to constitute a significant impact to the net area for the region. This was for cultivated agricultural land. We are unaware of why this land, which is grazing land and more abundant than high quality agricultural land, unlike the details within the solar farms in the Shepparton region that were part of a ministerial application. So I guess we would like clarification around why it was deemed that there was a policy basis to identify that the application should be refused on the grounds of loss of good quality agricultural land.
In relation to that one, the land is identified in a report on agricultural versatility that was done for the Wangaratta municipality by Agriculture Victoria in 2000. This document is a reference document in the Wangaratta planning scheme and is used by officers to guide their assessment, and in this case the officers have considered the outcomes of that as one of the considerations in assessing this application.
Could that not have been part of a condition to avoid that land, given that it only affects about 1/7 of the site?
The officer's recommendation was not to piecemeal the application.
Okay. And just one more question, that it does refer in that application to the land being identified as being having versatility rather than being productive. I would like to understand the difference between those two terms and how it was considered that a reference document which talks about versatility of land deemed that the land should be refused on the grounds of loss of productive agricultural land.
In relation to the document itself, it clearly outlines what are the high quality, low quality areas across our agricultural landscape, and we have also some local policies which clearly identify where council should avoid certain types of activities on the high and very high quality lands. So officers have taken some guidance out of those documents.
Okay, thank you. I would like to let the council know that I would be willing to answer questions in relation to the specific grounds of refusal, to the extent that this helps inform the decision and the scope of the proceedings and experts at BCAT, particularly in relation to the refusal on heritage grounds, the refusal on ecology grounds, the refusal on loss of good quality agricultural land, and on visual impact.
Thank you.
Can you just run me by those employment jobs again? Because the numbers that you quoted weren't the first time that we discussed this. They've changed since that point in time.
Yeah. Look, we are understanding more about these projects as we move through the process. We do try to lowball these figures. In any planning application, it is better to cover the full extent of the impact, even if that is greater than what you will ultimately build. And in the same way, I think it's necessary to provide a lower figure than what it could potentially be. So our figures are very conservative. That said, we have seen through the construction of the Ross River Solar Farm, in which we quoted a figure of about, I think it was somewhere from 100 to 150 jobs, that we've had up to 250 employees at any time. So the figures are likely to be much higher, in fact, based on a 140 megawatt solar farm proposal.
I reiterate, you're talking about jobs local or jobs Melbourne and district, because when I spoke with Ecom, when they first wanted to speak to the people who lived in the houses, the conversations that I had there wasn't any local jobs.
Sorry, who is Eco?